Public housing program, 12,000, a net addition of 12,000 additional public houses in the time that we've been in government. That's not including these ones that we're visiting today, to acknowledge the fact that the momentum is continuing. We know that we've still got a lot of work to do to make sure that we're tackling the need for public housing. So there's a significant program. The 12,000 that we're talking about, that's a net addition. So in some cases, many more have been built because they've been replacing other houses that needed to be upgraded. So in this particular site, there were some previous state houses on here. They've been removed and replaced by new modern homes, significantly more new modern homes than were here previously. It's one of the ways that we're able to significantly increase the affordable renting that we know we need to really kind of get on top of the shortage that we've had over a long period of time. By contrast, in the 9 years before we became the government, there were the net numbers were about a 1,500 reduction in the number of public houses that we had. So we're making good progress, but we've got more work to do.
Will the Labour Party have a significant housing policy in the upcoming election?
I'm not announcing any new policies today, but what I am acknowledging is that if you look across the last couple of budgets and projects like this, there's still a lot, there's thousands more houses under construction and in the pipeline. Our commitment as a government and a commitment as the Labour Party is to continue that momentum.
But you could tell us if you had an election plan. I don't need the details. Is housing going to be a focus?
There'll certainly be a housing manifesto.
Are you confident that Michael would recuse himself from every decision that he needed to?
No, I'm not, and I think that was clear yesterday. There were some decisions, for example, around the banking inquiry where he should have at least declared an interest so that it could have been assessed whether or not he needed to recuse himself, and he didn't do that.
Are you confident that he recused himself from everything he should have over the airport shares?
Again, not necessarily, and that is one of the reasons that we require ministers to declare any interests. The ultimate responsibility for ministers rests with the individual minister. So they declare any interests that they have. It's then up to the minister to manage that. So obviously we don't have someone checking over their shoulder in every decision that they make. The reason that we have a declaration system is because as much as anything else, it brings any potential conflicts to the minister's own attention so that they know they're there and they can manage them.
And did he have any other excuses for why he didn't sort this out?
I haven't spoken to him since my press conference yesterday. He's headed home. I think I'm, giving him the courtesy of giving him a little bit of space. Obviously, yesterday would have been a very difficult day for him, and I think he does deserve the opportunity to have a little bit of space.
When you said Stuart Nash, you suggested that he go away and reconsider his political future. Did you make the same suggestion to Michael Wood?
I certainly suggested to Michael that he needs to think about how he can, if he wants to continue in politics, he needs to think about how he can move to tidy up that part of his life which clearly doesn't seem to have been a priority for him, because it should have been.
Should he just leave politics at the election?
Look, as I've indicated, human beings make mistakes, but clearly if Michael wants to continue in politics, he will need to address what clearly has been a real blind spot for him and something that hasn't been acceptable.
How can the public trust him again?
Look, ultimately, that's not really a matter for me. That's something that he needs to reflect on himself.
On the shares restriction issue that you talked about in Cabinet, or in your stand-up yesterday, this is a Cabinet decision, so it wouldn't need to be going through legislation, correct? So you could just snap your fingers and order it?
Generally, changes to the Cabinet manual are made over a period of time, and generally to incorporate new rules into a Cabinet manual, it's generally not a partisan process. So generally the goal of the Cabinet manual is to create rules that endure regardless of who the government is. So one of the processes that we would go through is obviously consulting the opposition. If we were going to change the Cabinet manual, for example, I'm quite encouraged by the fact that the Leader of the Opposition seems to indicate that he also agrees that there could be further change in this area. It means we might be able to do that relatively quickly.
So is there scope to do this before the election then?
Well, I'm awaiting the advice, but if there's a bipartisan agreement that we think that ministers should have to divest themselves of shareholdings in order to be ministers, or when they become ministers, then we may be able to move reasonably quickly in that area.
Did Michael Wood mislead the Cabinet?
What was that?
Did Michael Wood mislead the Cabinet?
He certainly did not disclose interests which he should have.
Yeah, but right back did he mislead the Cabinet Office then?
He did not disclose to the Cabinet Office all of the shareholdings that he had through the trust that he was both a beneficiary and a trustee of.
But he said that he'd divested them. The Cabinet Office went back and checked that with him multiple times, and he never corrected them multiple times. that's almost a bald-faced lie.
And he hasn't given me an explanation for why it is that he was indicating to the Cabinet Office that they had been sold when clearly they hadn't.
Are you seeking an explanation for that? Like, do you want him on your team?
I've asked him several times about that, and as I've indicated, he hasn't given me a real explanation for why he was saying he had divested them when he hasn't.
Since your press conference yesterday, has there been any other decisions he was involved with that were either an actual or a perceived conflict of interest?
None that have been identified thus far.
A couple of questions on China. We heard in a couple of days. What's your takeaway from the Blinken summit in Beijing?
Look, I think we're doing something on China after this, and I haven't had a chance to just get the latest, download from the conversations that have been happening there, which I'm intending to do is before we do so can we just hold the questions on China for a little bit, and then I'm certainly happy to come back to them.
Just one more.
Yeah.
Do you agree with US President Joe Biden's assessment that Xi Jinping is a dictator?
No, and the form of government that China has is a matter for the Chinese people.
In the House yesterday during...
Do they have a say?
If they wanted to change their system of government, then that would be a matter for them.
How would they do that?
Well, that would be a matter for them.
In the House yesterday, during the debate on the alleged offending that went on within Oranga Tamariki, Kelvin Davis made a comment calling Christopher Luxon Mr. Tesla. Do you think this was an appropriate time to be politicking like this? I think the situation in Oranga Tamariki is a serious one. I think it's important that we take it seriously. I understand that Kelvin Davis has indicated that he didn't think he got his tone right in that debate yesterday. I wasn't there, I didn't see the debate, but certainly I think it is something that the government takes seriously. I know Kelvin as a minister takes it seriously. Well, does he? I mean, he's politicking in the House, using a story about Tesla during this extremely serious debate. Is that good enough for a minister that has responsibilities for Oranga Tamariki?
As I've indicated, I mean, Parliament is a place of robust debate, but I think Kelvin probably got the tone a bit wrong on that.
How does a Minister of Children talking about serious sexual behaviour with children get his tone wrong on this?
As I've indicated, I think he was being subjected to quite a lot of, from what I gather, quite a lot of interjection at the time and was responding to some of that. I think in the process of doing that, he should have taken a more restrained tone.
Interjections happen every day, literally every question time, every debate. Shouldn't he compose himself? He should hold himself to a higher standard.
Look, the reality is Parliament is a robust environment. Ministers need to make sure they get their tone right. Where they don't, they should acknowledge that. I can't say in every parliamentary debate I've ever participated in that I would have got the tone 100% right.
Do you think there's enough oversight of Oranga Tamariki's care facilities and justice facilities?
I have a lot of confidence in Mike Bush, and I think he's the right person to have a good look at that and to make sure that those facilities are operating appropriately. Obviously, I want to be careful about the fact that there could well be police investigations and other investigations that emerge in the next little while. Mike Bush, I think, is the right person to make sure that Oranga Tamariki are tidying their house up, while also making sure that if there are any criminal matters, that the police can do their job as well.
Does it concern you that it took the Children's Commissioner to make a surprise visit to a youth justice facility for the second instance or staff member who's behaved inappropriately towards children, for that to come to light?
I think it will depend very much on what happens next as to whether these were isolated incidents or whether they are part of a broader pattern. Obviously, there are a number of people who work in these facilities. It's important that if there is a broader pattern that needs to be addressed, that it is. But I think we need to allow Mike Bush to do the work that he's doing to identify whether this is in fact a more systemic problem.
Are you confident though that the government is doing enough to keep young people safe in Oranga Tamariki?
I think the Oranga Tamariki youth justice facilities are dealing with some of the most complex, troubled and difficult kids to work with. I've visited some of them myself. It is a really tough environment. These kids often are badly damaged young people, and they have a lot of complex needs. It's really, really difficult work. I've met some amazing people who work in them who just do a sterling job, and I regret for their sake that clearly the actions of some are undermining them, because it is a really tough job, and we need to value those people who do that work, because without them we couldn't run these facilities.
Has the government done enough?
Like I said, the reform process around Oranga Tamariki is an ongoing process. It is a tough nut to crack. One of the challenges is making sure that we are attracting the right people and that we are recruiting people, and that has been a challenge for Oranga Tamariki. We're working hard to train more social workers, for example, because we know we've got a nationwide shortage of that, and Oranga Tamariki are at the forefront of what that looks like, it is a really tough job they've got.
On government facilities,
Jenna.
One of the questions that couldn't be answered yesterday was whether or not the people who have been stood down were vetted before they start their jobs. Is that good enough?
That's a question for Oranga Tamariki. I don't know the answer to that, sorry.
Want to know the answer
Of course I do, and I'm confident that Mike Bush will absolutely be the right person to get those answers.
What happens
if you lose
been
another
the
minister?
for a long time? Do you think it's time for someone new?
I think Kelvin Davis has done a great job as Minister for Children. I think he's a very passionate advocate for young New Zealanders. I think he recognises that the care and protection system has not delivered the sorts of outcomes that we would expect of it as a country over a long period of time. We're talking about generations worth. That takes a while to turn that around, but I know that Kelvin is very passionate about doing that.
Him in this job?
Yes.
What happens if another minister gets sacked or needs to resign before the election? Do you need to go to the polls early? Can you sort of limp on with a cabinet of 18?
I've got an incredibly talented cabinet and a talented lineup of backbenchers. The reason I've not elevated another one of those really talented backbenchers to the ministry is because we literally are only 8 parliamentary weeks away from an election campaign.
Are you absolutely confident that you're not going to lose another minister next month?
Like I said, I deal with issues on a day-to-day basis as I encounter them. Ministers certainly know what my expectations are.
Are you
frustrated that a lot of
if you have to lose another minister, you lose the confidence of the public, though, don't you? And at that point, do you look at...
Well, ultimately, that's a question for the public. Everyone gets a vote in a general election. I'm intending to put forward a very strong and compelling case for the re-election of our government.
So there's no chance of a snap election? It's still October 14th?
We've already set the date. The wheels are already in motion. There will be an election on October the 14th.
Are you frustrated
Yes.
that a lot of the issues that you've had to deal with since becoming Prime Minister actually happened before you came Prime Minister and you've been left to mop them up?
Look, I can only deal with the situation that I've got in front of me. I like to think that I act decisively, but that I follow a fair process in doing that.
Is it a coup for New Zealand to get the co-op to go to China?
I think it's a very positive sign that our relationship, our relationship is valued on the China side as well as it is on the New Zealand side.
How often do you talk to Jacinda Ardern?
We catch up from time to time. She's obviously doing some work for me as the special envoy around the Christchurch call. That's been the subject of the last couple of conversations that I've had with her.
When you catch up, do the topics include subjects such as Michael Wood, such as Stuart Nash, issues that she's left your cabinet with?
On occasion.
What did you say?
What did you say today?
What was that?
Are you going to catch up with her when she's in the Beehive today?
No, I'm aware that she's in Wellington today, but I'm not going to get a chance to catch up with her, no.
What do you say when you talk about these issues that have been left for you?
On occasion I have called her to find out what she knew about a particular situation, because often you ask me what she knew about a particular situation, so I like to be able to answer that if I can.
Can the government do anything to avoid the tertiary education cuts that are coming on through the system at the moment?
I think there are two things. One, I want to acknowledge it's a difficult time for the universities in particular. That's a combination of forces. Obviously there's increasing costs which they have to grapple with, but also we have seen, because of the strong labour market, there is a decline in enrolments in all of our universities except for Canterbury, and that is something that the universities have to adapt to. In terms of the other major part of the public tertiary system, Te Pukenga, there's obviously a massive system shift going on there between people doing off-the-job training through polytechs and people doing on-the-job training. We're seeing huge growth in on-the-job training, and some of that's coming at the detriment of the off-the-job training. So they're having to adapt to that, and that does mean disruption.
Forecasts are for unemployment to rise, meaning more people will go to university because they can't find a job. So in many cases, these universities are going to have to rehire people they've fired to deal with more enrolments. That just seems...
Forecasts are forecasts, but the reality is there have been many occasions in the last 4 or 5 years where forecasts of unemployment rising have been there. If the tertiary education system had banked on those, they would have got it badly wrong. So they have to deal with a combination of reality, whilst also making sure that they've got the capacity to deal with future growth if it eventuates.
You're going to China, you're going to be using Chinese translators. When you're in China, Victoria University is cutting Chinese language courses. It just seems so short-sighted.
That's a question for the university.
As a former student unionist, does that sit uncomfortably for you, those cuts?
I really value tertiary education and I value a university education. I was the student president on the Victoria University Council the last time Victoria University went through a major restructuring, cost-cutting exercise. And yes, I was a critical advocate during that process, but I accepted that the process needed to happen.
What do you think
have
that...
full confidence in your entire cabinet?
Yes.
What do you think that former University President Chris Hipkins would say to Prime Minister Chris Hipkins today, looking at the situation?
I think he'd say I'm doing a great job.
Well,
Right.
he would.
All right, thanks everybody. Cheers.
I love the look in your face, Megan. Nearly elected.
Yeah, no, I just get. I